Now, before I even get into it, I do want to warn you that there will be spoilers for the two most recent episodes of Star Wars Rebels, those being Heroes of Mandalore Part 1 and 2. So if you haven't seen them yet, check them out first, and then feel free to come back here and hear my thoughts on them, and then leave your own in the comments below. And with that warning out of the way, I'll say that I liked but certainly didn't love these first two episodes of Season 4. Yes, they may have been two of the most action-packed episodes we've ever seen, and getting the return of Bo-Katan, a character from the Clone Wars, not to mention seeing so many Mandalorians in action, and learning even more about their culture, is always appreciated. But I thought that the weapon Sabine had designed that targets Mandalorian armor and vaporizes the individual inside, while leaving everyone else intact, was a little odd. I also found it a little odd that, even though I understand why it was done for the sake of the story, that Sabine was the only one who knew how to amplify its power so that it had better range. I mean, the Empire has some of the best scientists in the galaxy at their disposal, and they couldn't find one that could figure it out? Really? Give Galen Erso an afternoon with that thing, and it'd probably hit and disintegrate every Mandalorian in the galaxy. I also didn't love Sabine's reasoning for building it in the first place, which was essentially because I could, though I can certainly understand why pretty much every Mandalorian, including her family, was pissed off at her. I also found it odd that she probably designed this thing when she was like, what, maybe 13 or 14 years old, and that again, no one else could figure this thing out? And we know she'd have to be that young because when we first see her in Season 1 of Rebels, she's already like 16 years old, and before that, she'd spent time as a bounty hunter with Ketsu. So that means she would have had to escape the Imperial Academy around 14 years old or so. Which means you're basically telling me a kid designed a weapon no one else could then figure out, and that she likely came up with the idea to create it completely on her own, because I highly doubt anyone went up to her when she was like 14 and said, "Do you think you can create a weapon that targets Mandalorian armor and only vaporizes the person inside and leaves everything else untouched?" That seems like a very specific idea that you don't take to a student at an academy and assume they can pull it off. However, I can easily forgive all that, but what disappoints me the most about this episode was that they didn't kill off Sabine's mother and brother. And I know what you're thinking, Thor, you're a horrible person, but hear me out. I just feel like it was a wasted opportunity for some real character growth for Sabine, for her to truly feel the consequences of her actions for building this weapon, again, because she could. Well, for more than the 30 seconds which she actually thought she'd killed them anyway. Creating this weapon and losing part of her family because of it could have shaped this character going forward, not just in this last season of Rebels, but for whatever they do with her next. Because you know she's not dying. They've spent way too much time building her, and the Mandalorian's up for that. And here's another thing that bugged me just a bit in this episode, or should I say that's bugged me for some time, but was particularly highlighted in this episode. Is Kanan really blind? Because it doesn't seem to hamper him in the least. I mean, he is literally jumping from the back of one flying Mandalorian to another in this episode. And yes, I get that the Bendu taught him how to see again, and that Chirrut in Rogue One was only partially force sensitive and did rather well for himself even though he was blind. But Kanan's blindness, which is a pretty big deal for anybody to deal with, Jedi or not, feels like it got addressed and solved all in the space of one episode, which was the Season 3 premiere. And now it's just this minor annoyance at best. And sure, maybe it shows how strong with the Force he is, or how powerful of a Jedi he's becoming, but I was really hoping it would be something that would affect him more, and something he constantly has to grapple with, not something we have to remind ourselves has happened to him. And speaking of Kanan, one of the things I really loved about these episodes is how they're laying the groundwork for tragedy for him, which again makes me sound like a horrible person, but don't get me wrong here, because Kanan is my favorite character in the show. However, I think it's clear here that Kanan and Hera is happening this season, or at least Kanan wants it to happen. And as I've predicted before, I think Kanan's death is going to somehow correlate with a rejection from Hera, that she will be too concerned about the cause or the rebellion, and this will break Kanan, and he'll end up dying either for Hera or her cause she chose over him. And while on the topic of relationships, I know there are some out there that really want to see Ezra and Sabine happen, and there were some hints to it in this episode, or at least indications that Ezra is still very much infatuated with her, but this one I don't see happening, at least not now. However, I fully expect both these characters to survive this show and move on to something else, maybe even the next animated show, whenever or whatever that might be. Now, hands down my favorite part of these episodes was Bo-Katan taking up the Darksaber and unifying the clans under her, and just all the Mandalorian stuff in general, because who doesn't love Mandalorians? And it also really has me eager to learn more about the fight between the Empire and the Mandalorians, though I'm not sure how much of that we'll see in the last season of Rebels, since I think they're going to focus primarily on the Ghost Crew. Another thing that truly impressed me here was the continued improvements to the animation, and no, it's still not my favorite animation style to begin with, nor is it as impressive as what they were doing in the later seasons of the Clone Wars, but the detail in the faces and all the different styles of Mandalorian armor and the weathering on said armor was impressive. And that was important since one of the stars of this episode was the armor of these proud warriors itself, and it was great to hear just how important that armor is to them and how Sabine's has been in her family for 500 years. And all that really leaves me hoping we do indeed get more stories about the Mandalorians in the new canon. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of these episodes, so leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.